Call your sponsor.
Call you sponsor.
Call your sponsor.
Call you.
Bitch, call your sponsor.
Call your sponsor. Call your sponsor.
Who was very open about being in the rooms of AA from time to time for their addiction. Yeah, it comes up a lot. To be sober and stay sober means you will have to have an outfit of mourning in your closet.
So, I have a question. So, when someone passes that's in the rooms, that, I mean, I'm sure you've had this. I've had this a few times now, where I know of a person, whether in the spotlight or not, that is in the rooms, and has had their struggles with staying sober, and then hearing of their passing. So I've always tried to stay out of it as far as how did it happen, you know? But I think that it's actually, I think I read somewhere that that's actually part of self-preservation, wanting to know. But I think culturally, it's like not necessarily appropriate. I don't know. And then the other part of me is like, well, I sometimes just assume, oh, it's because of, they were struggling. Which I actually don't know for a fact. I don't have the report. You know what I mean? Like,
right. We don't have the toxicology report in our hands.
Right. I went to a memorial service, when was it? Maybe 3 months ago now. And I didn't know what happened. This person was sober for a very long time, and they seemed awfully young to pass. And so my brain thought about what happened. I was just going to show support and my condolences and my sympathy, and hug his surviving partner, who I hadn't seen in a few years. And, he came out and he told me, he was like, oh, he's been struggling with some health issues. Didn't tell me specifically, but it wasn't because he had relapsed,
Right.
So where does your mind go with those types of things? Do you find the need, like, I find that I want to know, but I don't ask, because it's like, that's not what no one needs to report back to Sam what's really going. You know what I mean? Like, that's not their job. They're mourning somebody.
I mean, I definitely want to know. And I feel like that's part of the human condition.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a song where the lyrics, like, some of it, but you can't remember the other part of the lyrics. Like, there's a part of your brain that wants to go look it up and find out what that is. Like, you just need the closure. And we don't necessarily need the closure, but I'm all for going down that path. I had a sponsee that passed, and I think in February it will be 2 years. And I was super close with her. I mean, she called me 5 times a day. I'd known her for about 8 years. I'd only started sponsoring her like the last 5 months before she passed. But before that, we'd been friends for a really long time. And I'd always admired her and respected her, and really felt like this woman, the next time I saw her, when she left LA, I thought the next time I'm going to see her is going to be on Saturday Night Live. Like, she was just so young and so vivacious and so smart and so funny, and going to, the best college on the East Coast, and with that goal in mind. And, 8 years later, I'm attending her service, and standing next to her mom. And it just all felt so wrong. But the reason you reminded me of that is that she had sent me text a few days before saying that she did not consider herself a member of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that, in my mind, it let me off the hook. and this is just pure honesty of like, I didn't fail her as a sponsor. I kept giving her, she kept wanting me to fire her and I wouldn't do it.
Mm.
There was no amount of her not showing up or not doing anything that would make me fire her. So she had to send me a text saying, I'm no longer a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm.
And on some level, I feel really good about that.
Mm.
Not that, of course, not that she passed, but just that it was unconditional. My support for her, because of the way that the program is outlined, was unconditional.
Mm.
To the point where she had to go, I'm removing myself.
Mm.
And it was only a few days later. And during those days, she sent me a note saying, I can't do this world. Like, I can't do it. And when I went to the service, or just like the day before thing and met the mom and all that, the mom ran up to me and said, she didn't OD and she didn't take her own life. The coroner said that it was just this thing where she passed in her sleep at 27 years old. And I was like, none of that makes sense.
That's a great story. Great story.
But I knew that this is what that and I shouldn't be the one to take it away from me. With text saying that she wanted to end her life, me with text, saying that she was no longer going to be a member and that she'd been out drinking. Like, it was not up to me to then give that to that mother. It was like, she needs a story to survive through these days. Misty, shut the fuck up. So
yeah.
That's all.
Oh goodness. Loss is real. Like, it's a part of life, and it's also everything for me at the end, it goes back to the feelings. I know the chapter isn't into feelings, and there are feelings that need to be felt.
It should be into feelings.
You think there should be a page 165, how to feel your feelings?
Or just not even how, just feel them.
Yeah, feel them. Feel them.
Be in the moment and feel what comes up, because otherwise you're storing it and it will create these places where even if you don't take a drink or a drug, you do other things.
Yeah. And I know for me, the simplest, easy way to avoid is to go and create another story.
Yes. That is what we keep talking about with instead of whatever it is going, how did it get here? Okay, now I've created another layer. That doesn't...
Why? Why is this happening?
And then we can go down that rabbit hole and that rabbit, and keep going down the rabbit holes when really we can just go, okay, this might not work out. Moving on.
Yeah.
And our brain wants us to just keep spinning out. And then we need, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of how they say that Oxycontin, that people, their bodies will feel pain when there's not pain because it's addicted to the drug. And so they're not... Yeah, so they're not even, literally is not their fault, because their body is telling them they're in pain when they're not pain and that they have to have the drug, right? So it's kind of like what my brain will do to me when it wants the drug of escaping by TV or escaping by shopping or, not feeling. It's telling me like, oh, let's create all these other rabbit holes so you just feel overwhelmed and you have to grab TV.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody the other day about this whole thing about how do I regulate myself, right? Like, there's a certain level of dysregulation when there's an emotional upheaval. And what are ways that I find myself doing this? Sometimes can be really weird and wacky, and other times, there was a span of 2 weeks that I noticed, like, I would find myself at home after work on my on my back in my bed, just scrolling, for like an hour. And it only dawned on me maybe 10 days in where I'm like, oh, this seems to be a pattern. And what I realized is like, oh, this is how I'm just like getting back to neutral, And it's actually not that bad. It's actually quite enjoyable. And I don't need to put a kibosh or start putting blocks on my thing. It's not, this isn't like a quote unquote unmanageable situation where, it's like an hour and then it's like I meet friends for dinner or whatever that was, you know what I mean? But it was this thing of like, it was just this subtle awareness I had where it's like, oh, this is how I'm decompressing for my day. In the past, that would have been a drink. Or drinks galore, actually,
Right. Oh, I love that. And I love how kind you were to yourself in it.
That's been the practice that I get from you.
Yay. All right. We are coming up on our questions.
Ask away.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What are you grieving? What old stories are you grieving today and willing to see differently? What fundamental old stories?
Hit me on my heart. There's two. One is the unlovable, which I've not necessarily been fully 100 in touch with, but I'm really getting like, oh, that's the unlovable thing. And then the other part of it is like the good enough, which could also be filed under the unlovable, is like, I'm not good enough in that, because the whole thought process is if I'm not good enough, then no one will love me or like me. But it all goes back to this lovable piece. So so it's the awareness of this grieving of like, oh, that story is, that's like deep in my core, and then the practice has been the awareness, and then the loving. How do I love myself more versus fixing, adjusting, correcting, which is what I grew up into.
So
That's
good.
you.
So beautiful. An old story that I'm grieving is that I'm not enough. And I'm grieving it because I just don't have the evidence to support it anymore.
Yes. I love the evidence-based, you know me.
Yeah. I'm like, you can't, like, there's no holding on to that story anymore. Like, you are enough. It's like one time I went to go visit my hometown, and it was, they were out of rental cars. It was during the pandemic, and the only choice was to rent a Tesla, which this is when this person wasn't so problematic. The Tesla was like a good thing. And I was staying at this hotel, and I was going to this art show, and I'm like, being the girl from the wrong side of the tracks in this hometown, like, I can't, that story's not holding up anymore. I'm staying at a 5-star place and driving a Tesla and going to an art opening. Like, you we're not able to hold on to the bad girl from the wrong side of the tracks that everybody hates anymore. Sorry, honey. You just can't keep that one. So it's that kind of thing where it's grieving stories that my brain is used to holding on to, but the evidence doesn't support it, and it's time to grieve those.
I love that. And I love you. Thank you so much, Missy.
I love you too, Sam. All right, let's go get another one. Bitch, call your
sponsor.
Your sponsor.
Call you
your
sponsor.
sponsor.
Call you
Call
sponsor.
your
Call you
sponsor.
sponsor. Call you.
Bitch, call your sponsor.
Call your sponsor. Call your sponsor.
New episode tomorrow. Send us an email, bcysponsor@gmail.com.